Hey everyone, welcome to the Coach Catalyst podcast. This show is about helping you grow as a coach by standing on the shoulders of giants. Each show, you get a different mentor in your ear. The early motivations, the successes, the failures, the tools, the tricks, and the insight into where the industry is going. All of it so you can make your own dent in the world. Remember, success leaves clues. Now, without further ado, on to the show.
Welcome to another edition of the Coach Catalyst podcast. I'm your host, Trevor Whitwer. On today's episode, I have the pleasure of speaking with Nolan Harper, who is the owner of Proven Digital, a YouTube's ad agency. Now, we definitely get into all things YouTube, so if you're interested in that, this is the episode for you. But we get his backstory first, which is very, very interesting. He spent time in the Navy SEALs doing BUDS training. He spent time as a skydiver. He did drop shipping. He did a bunch of other businesses and actually found himself $250,000 in debt. So we get into all of those stories, and that really set the foundation to what he is doing now. And that's digital video, especially around YouTube. Now, like all episodes, I want to find out for the coach that wants to get started on this platform, what should they do? We get into that. We get into why he believes YouTube is the platform of the future, more so than Facebook, and how you can win at YouTube. So this and all of that are in this episode with Nolan Harper on the Coach Catalyst podcast. We'll see you on the flip side. Nolan, welcome to the Coach Catalyst podcast.
What's going on, man? It's great to be here. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, this is awesome. So just to give a little bit of context, like I had a random person message me on Facebook and they're like, hey, you should meet this person. And I was like, okay, here's my calendar, send it to this person. And then you ended up booking a call and we had a great conversation. And I was like, we need to have you on the podcast. So thanks for talking to a stranger.
Yeah, man. No, same back to you.
So, I mean, after we were talking too, we're going to get into this in the show today, really getting into YouTube and digging into that, because that's kind of like your bread and butter right now. But I think it's good to just give some backstory on where you're at and like how you even started like getting into YouTube in general. And let's go like way back. And so have you always kind of been into like the fitness world? Like, has it always kind of been a part of your identity, or how did you kind of get around to this world?
Okay, great question. So the short answer to that is yes. I would not say that I'm like the biggest dude or the most in shape or anything like that.
Yep.
But I've always been passionate about it. Did CrossFit for a number of years, like probably most people at this point. If you're not a coach, you're probably actively doing it, or you know someone who's doing it, or someone that you want to make fun of is doing it. Either way, I've worked out for many years. I've been kind of in that space. Back when I was 19, I trained up for a couple of years, and then I ended up going through SEAL training, which was a pretty awesome experience. Ended up going through that a couple of times due to some injuries. Didn't end up making it, but it taught me a lot about myself. Went through and spent some time in the Navy. And then I actually ended up getting to go back to BUDS. And I ended up blowing out my knee 3 times between the time that I was there, the first 2 goes, and then the time I was supposed to go back. So unfortunately, I lost out on that one. And I said, same knee. Yeah. 3 ACLs, torn and stretch MCL, PCL, like the works, man.
How did it happen?
Almost non-existent.
How did it happen? Were you like in sand?
Yeah, great
and
question.
Was it just a weird...
So the initial injuries that happened were very subtle, but they compounded over time. So the initial injuries happened in my first rounds of BUDS, kind of in first phase leading up to Hell Week. A lot of log PTs, a lot of running. I mean, you're running, I think I did the math. It was like something like 18 to 20 miles a day between the chow halls and between each evolution. And it wears down on you. I was rolled back a couple of times. And so few of my friends ended up making it to the teams practically before I got through first phase. And so it's one of those things where your body's not really meant to go through that much for that long. And so that really wore down on me. And it was actually, I ended up doing a deployment overseas to the Middle East, and was running around with a 240 and level 3 body armor for a while. And it was, that kind of took it the rest of the way. It kind of damaged my knees pretty good. And whenever I came back, I had kind of a fatal blow to it. And that started the downhill spiral. And then I ended up getting a couple more surgeries over the coming years as I would re-injure it. And so one of them was right after my second rehab. I was fortunate enough to be embedded with the Special Forces group over in the East Coast, and they let me rehab with their guys as I trained to go back. And it was like, I don't know, 2 months after I had just gotten my last ACL surgery, and lo and behold, I was on an obstacle course training to go back, and sure enough, I tore it one last time. And so that was the nail in the coffin, and I was like, you know what? It's time. God wants me elsewhere. It's time to move on. So with that, I dipped out of the Navy. So.
Hey there, you sexy little devil, you. Sorry for interrupting your regular programming. This is Trevor. Now, I've got a big announcement, something I'm really, really excited about, and that is the Super Coaches Summit, our Coach Catalyst Summit that is taking place in August 5th and 6th in Reston, Virginia, right outside of the Dulles Airport. Super easy to get to. Now, we've been to a lot of events. We go to a lot of events, and we wanted to make this event different. Most events are educational. You have great speakers on stage. You take a bunch of notes. You go home and do nothing. Right? We want this event to be more practical. We want it to be tactical. We want you to leave the event with a better business than when you came. Not going home and hoping that you implementing at the event. And then the second thing we want this event to be is the best networking, connecting, collaborating event you've ever been to. So we've got some really special things in store to facilitate those connections. So if you're looking for a different event, something that's going to level you up, and an event that's going to allow you to have a better business when you leave than when you came, definitely check out the Super Coaches Summit. We are dotting all the I's, crossing all the T's. This thing is going to be on point, and I want you to be there. Well, like, to go back even after the first one, like, is impressive. And even after the second one, was it just a determination that, like, hey, was the SEALs kind of like your pinnacle to an extent? Like, hey, I want to go do this, or were there other reasons on why that path?
I know it sounds crazy, but I wanted to do it since I was 6 years old. Cool. And that was back in a time when nobody knew who they were. I mean, I said no one, they just were not publicized the way they are today. My dad had a friend that he grew up with who just, that was his entire life. He actually was one of the few guys in the world who's ever been through like Green Beret, SEALs, and then he ended up going, I believe, into Delta. But he's just one of those few guys who was able to bounce around. And I looked up to that so much. And I was like, I really, like, I want this. So I literally started working out when I was like 8. Cool. I've got a photo of me in high school, and I was just ripped, which was funny because I wasn't all that coordinated at the time, but I definitely was trying real hard. So,
you had your eyes set on this as like a quote unquote profession from a very early age.
Yep, it's pretty much everything I wanted, and it just didn't work out, and that's okay. It's I've gotten my path has taken a very interesting trajectory over the last few years, so I have zero complaints. It was a blessing getting to go through it and learn about myself, though. So
was it a challenge to let it go? I mean, was it a challenge like, hey, this just isn't going to happen, and really not because like you could. It's like the body broke down, like you can't make a new knee, right? Like it's just like we have to do something different.
Yep, that's exactly it. So transparently, when I blew out my knee the third time, I just sat down in the sand while they were bringing a stretcher, and I just started crying. Right. And I was like, because in that moment I knew, I was like, all my dreams are gone. After the first rehab, it was like still doable. After the second rehab, it was like, it's getting less likely, but still possible. And the third surgery was just like, there's no coming back. I mean, to try and subject my body to, what it went through when I was 19 again, at the age of, I think I was 23 when I was about to head back. Mm-hmm. It was like, you can't, that many times with this many problems, like you're not going to make it through, even PTRR, which is just the workup phase before INDOC. And so it's like, it was no go. So that was very hard for me. And I think I struggled with that for a few years. There was a lot of identity that I had thrown into this person that I believed myself to be and who I wanted to be. So yeah, that was tough.
Yeah, I couldn't even imagine. So did you end up, you get out of kind of military stuff. How old were you at that time?
It's 23.
23. So then kind of what was the next step? Because that's like a turning point, right? Like, hey, I've been doing this for, the last 4 or 5 years. Like, what do I do now? Because my guess is like, did you go to school during that time, or were you just kind of focused on kind of training and skills in the military?
I was pretty focused while I was in, but I did not go to school at all. I did get my pilot's license while I was in the military, but that was kind of just a hobby. I enjoyed flying. So when I got out, I really was kind of lost. I had expected that to be my career, and I was like, what the heck do I do now? And so the search began, and I did what everyone else does when they get out of the military. I used my GI Bill, went to school, got my bachelor's in criminal justice, and I bounced around a few different jobs. And then I realized one day that some of the reasons that I wanted to be in the teams was that I could get paid to skydive, and I could get paid to ride fast boats and do crazy things. And it occurred to me one day that I could just go and, learn to skydive. And so I was like, well, heck, okay, I'll go do that. And so I went to the local drop zone, and I did my first jump and paid to do it so that I could have my own parachute and everything. And I was hooked from the first jump, and I was like, I'm in. And so I went all in on skydiving, and that kind of turned into my career. So I started jumping with every spare dollar I had. I was jumping. And then, I ended up getting a job at a wind tunnel. They've got these wind tunnels that are indoor skydiving, for iFly. I got a job there pretty early on when they were just kind of, starting to go big. And for the next few years, that was everything to me. That was my entire life. It was my entire focus.
Are they legit? Are the wind tunnels legit? Like, I've seen them, like I've watched videos, but like, is it legit? You don't work there anymore. So
man, no one actually believes me. So it's like, I have 1,100 skydives in the sky, which by the way, is not that many. I know guys personally who have over 18,000 jumps. And so like, I still feel like I know absolutely nothing, but it's more experience than probably, 40% of people who jump. But, I can honestly tell you that the wind tunnel feels the exact same. And that's mostly because the experience that you get in the sky is largely a visual experience. And so it's visually stimulating. And so when you go out of the plane and you see the ground, there is no stomach drop out of the plane. There's nothing weird. It's actually pretty peaceful. A lot of people probably wouldn't think that on their first or second skydive. But once you get past the adrenaline rush of like, I'm nuts, I'm going out this door and there's nothing, you start to realize that there is no sensation. And that's largely because if you're on a roller coaster and you see the ground coming, that's what I mean when I talk about like the visual part of the sensation. We see the ground rushing up at us. We get that feeling of panic and tension, and then that causes us to react the way that we do. So the long answer to the short question, which is yes, it feels the exact same, and I love it. I have about actually, I don't remember the math. Probably 2,000 hours in the wind tunnel, and then about 1,100 skydives out of planes. So.
Do you still? So here's an interesting question, because you are a father. Do you still do a lot of skydiving, or has becoming a dad changed your perspective of risk?
I'm actually. That's a really good question, and I really do appreciate that question, because there's a lot of things that go into that. There's this media image of people who take risks as these guys who just throw caution to the wind and get after it. But it's funny because the guys who I met when I was a skydiver and I got to know were probably the most level-headed and cautious guys I've ever met in my life. And that went doubly for the guys who took that skydiving and started base jumping, which I ended up doing as well for a little while. They're the people who survive in it for a long period of time. They're very level-headed. They're calculated risk takers. And so when I think about everything that I have experienced in my past, and I think about my daughter now, it's one of these things where I would go back in a heartbeat. I view skydiving as very, very safe. Now, base jumping, I do not. There's a lot of factors you can't control. But with skydiving, I would absolutely go back and jump. I probably won't for a while now, but I've been focused the past year or so on understanding what it was, this altered state that I was constantly chasing in the sky. And I've actually come to find that I've gotten a lot of that same sensation in business or in other pursuits. And so I don't necessarily crave it from the sky itself anymore. I've realized I can get it from many different areas. And so that's actually been a big conversation I've been having with a number of people lately.
Oh, that's fascinating. That's super interesting. I appreciate you for sharing with that.
My favorite thing about Coach Catalyst.
My favorite thing about Coach Catalyst.
One of the things I love most about Coach Catalyst.
There are lots of things I love about Coach Catalyst.
And the reason why I love Coach Catalyst is that
the accountability off the back of that
is simplicity.
The support is amazing.
It allows me to give so much of me to my clients.
It's the drip feeding of content.
I can schedule lessons for my clients in advance.
Game changer for freeing up time.
It gives me my time back.
It's so simple and so easy.
Hi, I'm Kane, the founder of Coach Catalyst, the #1 accountability and communication software on the market today. We help coaches just like you keep their clients accountable and scale their business beyond what they've ever been able to do before. So if that sounds like something you want, let's take a look at how we can help. So Coach Catalyst was built on the 4 C's of coaching. Those are content, communication, community, and consistency. So for content, you need to go beyond just workouts and deliver the whole experience for the client so they get the results they deserve. For communication, you need to own your communication. If you don't own the communication, you don't own the client. So make sure you stop texting clients and use a centralized platform. For communities, get off of Facebook groups and take ownership over your social group with Coach Catalyst communities. And for consistency, the foundation of all results for clients, we took the best-selling book Atomic Habits and built all of these fundamentals right within our app that's going to guarantee to get your clients the best results possible. If you want to start using the 4 C's with your clients, content, connection, community, and consistency, make sure you run over to Coach Catalyst and start a free trial today.
So before we move on to the next one, what's the craziest thing you ever jumped off from a base jumping standpoint?
So the danger in base jumping comes in lack of time.
Right.
And so most of the jumps that I have are from objects that were about 450 feet or taller. I've jumped off of antennas. I've jumped off of bridges. But the scariest thing I've ever jumped off of was about a 180-foot antenna. And you can whisper from 180 feet and say hi to the person that's on the ground. And that is mortifying. It's like, you're right there.
Right.
And so like hoping your parachute, everything works properly, which, I mean, if you actually know how it works, it's actually pretty mechanical in nature. But man, I'll tell you what, that can be a little nerve wracking. And so that's the craziest thing I've jumped off of.
What's the lowest you can actually jump off and still get your parachute out?
Man, I've seen guys jump from as low as about 100 to 120 feet. I wouldn't do that, mostly because the risk again is that your parachute turns a different direction. It's called an off-heading opening. And then you hit the object that you jump off of. That's where most of the danger in base jumping comes from. In the sky, if you have an off-heading opening, you just turn that direction and you go that direction, you straighten out, and then you go wherever you got to go.
Right.
Man. I've seen guys in person do 120, and I was like, nope. I mean, 180 is low, 120 is super low.
Right. Oh man. All right. So you kind of left a little bit of this adrenaline and moved into kind of the video world. Was there anything kind of in between that what transitioned you in the video world, or why did you ultimately kind of get into video production?
Okay, so that's a really good question. I love video production. I always had a camera in my hands from the time I was about 10 to 12 years old.
Okay.
I made a bunch of movies, and then I started like doing weddings for friends, family, and then I did some videos for gyms and stuff. Mm-hmm. And so when I got to a point with skydiving, it was really more of like, okay, I have this skill. How can I make a little bit more money with it? And so I picked the camera back up and I started looking for ways to make money with it. And so went back to the old things of, filming weddings, filming events, filming business videos. And that's kind of how I got back into the video side of things.
And so you were just kind of probably freelancing, just going through your network and like, who needs some video production stuff? And then ultimately...
Yeah, and
Oh, go ahead.
I was going to say, and I was like, you know what, I really want to, by that point I had kind of tried to build several side hustles and businesses. I think I was on my 7th failed attempt, right? And I'd built them up. Each of these businesses I'd built up and they'd crashed down, right? Just complete failures. And by this point I was starting to launch a video production company. Okay. That was kind of my goal. I was like, okay, I'm going to take my video skills. I'm going to turn this into a real business. And that was the goal.
So you said something that we need to like talk about a little bit. So you've done a number of different side hustles that you said have built up and then kind of crashed back down. Was there something like reason why that happened? Like, was there an internal thing? Like, why did it kind of happen over and over again? Was it not the right market, not the right fit? Why do you feel like looking back on it now with probably a little more clarity?
I think there was a different lesson in every failure, right? There was always something, and in a lot of them, it probably was mindset. I didn't understand anything about business, anything about my own beliefs, my own, where my attention was going. And so I think it would be hard to just say it was one thing. I can say that my most successful attempt was like drop shipping before it became like really mainstream.
Okay.
And I took that business to about 20K a month. And then it just absolutely crashed on top of me, put me into a couple, 6 figures worth of debt. And
was that just because of
that? But that was also,
how did that put you in debt? Because you're not actually carrying inventory.
You're not carrying inventory, but the primary model is, push with ads, and then with the margin there, that's where your profit comes in, and you're hoping for anywhere from 25 to 40% in profit. So what threw me into debt was that I was still new to like media buying and Facebook ads, right? And that was still the early days where like there was like 2 or 3 guys talking about how to run Facebook ads. And so my margins started slipping, and I didn't pay close enough attention to my numbers on that one. And so I actually ended up being upside down. Again, very basic things that I just didn't really think through at the time. It's embarrassing to say now, but it was part of my evolution,
Right. Well, I mean, it's part of learning, right? And I mean, you're heavy in the ad space, right? And probably some of those experiences have now made you a better manager of what you're doing now.
Absolutely. Yeah, that was a hard lesson to learn, especially when I didn't have the money to cover it. So it was one of those things where I kept trying to revive it and kept trying to get it. And that kind of is what pushed me down into that multiple 6 figures of debt. That's what really hurt me.
So how did you like that? That's not just like, hey, like $500. Like, how did you pull out of that?
Yeah. So it's in that moment when you go, crap. Like, what am I going to do? I make, 35 grand a year. Like, how am I going to get out of this? This is a nightmare. And so it's in those moments where I think the strongest or the wisest tend to lean into it and go, okay, I'm really going to problem solve. I probably ran the other direction. I was like, I need to get a job that pays well. And then I just need to be really conservative for the next 3 to 5 years to get out of this. But the one thing that was valuable about that particular business over all the others was that it broke beliefs for me. When I saw 20 grand coming into the bank account per month, it's not that much, but at the time that was like unfathomable. And it was this idea, it was like, okay, like this is possible. What else is possible? And it broke beliefs for me. And that was what kind of put me in this mindset of, okay, I'm going to dig myself out of this, and then I'm going to go again. And I'm just going to keep going until I figure this out.
Do you feel like that's a quality that you've kind of had since birth, from the beginning? Were you a kid when you were younger that's just like, hey, I'm going to keep going, I'm going to figure this out? Kind of like the Will Smith, I'm going to die on the treadmill type of thing?
Yeah. I mean, I'll use buds as an example, right? Like I just kept on trying. And as long as my body was working, I was bent on making it work. But it also comes back to like, needing whatever it is that's on the other side of it, right? I think back to some of the activities that I participated in high school, and I wasn't that focused. And because I wasn't focused, the outcomes were small. I didn't really achieve any notable results in those things. Like take wrestling, for example. I actually really enjoyed wrestling, but I didn't care that much about it. So I didn't pour myself into it. And it was just kind of this like pastime hobby that I had, and I thought it was fun. If I had truly gone in and thrown myself into it, all of my attention, I feel like I could have done significantly better than I did. And when you take another example, this would be like my skydiving, right? Within 3 years, I had world records. in skydiving, where other guys would be in skydiving for 10, 15 years and they wouldn't even have a shot at a world record. And it's because I was obsessed. I threw everything that I had in it, and just like my attention and focus, every moment was thrown into skydiving. And I think that's, again, one of those lessons you learn over time. I used to pride myself in the fact that I was a dilettante. I would bounce around from thing to thing, and I had experience in a lot of things, but I wasn't great at any one thing.
Right.
And I think that was the worst thing that I could have ever done for myself. It didn't get me anywhere. And at the end of the day, it made me mediocre at a lot of things.
Okay. Oh, that's great.
As a gym owner, Coach Catalyst is the key to having low turnover. For several years, I struggled and spent 10 to 20 hours a week communicating with clients via phone calls, Facebook Messenger, email, and text messages. I had tried everything to make my life more efficient. I was at my wit's end. And then I found Coach Catalyst. Since starting the software, I have found a life again, and my clients are thanking me for being so involved in their fitness life. I've cut my daily commitment to interacting with over 300 clients to under 15 minutes a day, and have streamlined my 6-week challenges. I couldn't recommend it more. I just don't know if I would even be here today if it wasn't for Coach Catalyst. If you don't have an account already, you're missing out and not helping the people you could be.
What was like a turning point for you? So let's get into the digital, kind of, you're in the video production kind of digital space. Was there a turning point? Was there a client that was like, hey, this kind of like turned things around a little bit for me and it really helped maybe give you the confidence to keep going with this thing and make it successful?
With video production?
Yeah, let's talk about the video production aspect.
Okay. So yeah, I started to kind of, I think at the time I was a car salesman. Oh, I'm sorry. No, this is when I was still with iFly. And I was starting to realize that I could, in my spare time, because that was one of those jobs where I could completely disconnect. I was noticing that in my spare time, I could double, even triple how much I made from, my job without it taking too much of my focus and attention. And so, I kind of started trying to get more and more clients that way. And inevitably it didn't really go fantastic as far as like trying to get clients, because that was a piece that I was missing. I understood how to run ads because, I had how to sell products on the internet. I didn't understand how to like get clients on the internet. So that was a whole new world for me. And ultimately I failed at it. I didn't really get very many clients. I had a few, but I didn't get very many. And it was around this time that I was filming a video for a gym owner. And he was like, hey man, I got this guy who, and actually before I tell you this gym that I was going to, it was a CrossFit gym, loved the owner, and it was like normal size. You had like 20 people a class or 15 people a class, something like that. And then out of nowhere, he went from like 15 people a class to like 50 people a class out of nowhere. And I was like, what is going on here? And so he hired me to do a video for him. And then he was like, hey, I hired this guy to help me kind of grow my gym. And I was like, yeah, I can tell. Like we just like tripled our membership rate. Like what's going on? And he goes, yeah, like he's looking for a video guy. Is that something you're interested in? And I was like, no. I'm not interested in that. Like I'm trying to start my own business. I'm trying to dig my way out of this, or at least use this as a side hustle. And so I brushed it off. A couple weeks later, he said, no, he's still looking. Do you want to just interview for it? And I was like, okay. Why? You know what? It can't hurt. Let's see what's going on with it. So I had this interview, and it was the strangest interview. First off, this company had no website. They didn't have any like proof that it actually existed. Like nobody knew who they were. But then when you looked at their stuff, and all their stuff was like dirty, like the funnels weren't pretty, like none of it was just kind of there. It existed. And they were promising these huge things, great pay, work from home, unlimited vacation, phenomenal benefits. And I was like, okay, like this is a scam for sure. Like there's no way. And this is at a time before working remotely was like common.
Right.
And so I got on the interview, and for whatever reason, I don't know why or how, I ended up getting offered a job there. And I said, you know what? Let's do it. Let's do it.
Right.
So I went to work for them, and it was Alex and Layla Hormozy with Gym Launch. And I went to work with them, not really knowing what I was getting myself into or what it was or how it was. I just knew they needed videos, and I was the guy to do it. And so I went down 2 weeks after getting hired to their very first and only team event that followed their legacy client event, so their highest end client. And I met Alex and Layla for the first time. And I watched the transformation that every single person in that room had. And I went home to my girlfriend at the time. She's now my wife. And I said, honey, I don't know how to tell you this, but we need to move to Austin as fast as possible. We need to sell our house. We need to move. Like, I can't explain what this is, but I need to be as close to the center of it as possible. So within 2 months, we'd sold our house. We were down in Austin, and I lived 8 minutes from Alex. And, that's kind of where that journey started.
So Alex at this point is kind of a big name in the fitness industry, and he's really blown up lately. But at that time, it was a little bit smaller. So what were some of the things, what were the biggest takeaways in that time that you spent there? What were some of the things that you learned? Because you did kind of a number of different jobs that you weren't necessarily like what you signed up for in a way. What were some of the things that you learned while you were there?
I couldn't even begin to put it into words. I think I grew more in that time than I had the previous 10 years combined. The proximity, I was fortunate enough to be Alex's only in-person employee. So I was able to work directly for him, learn from him, and just really watch and dissect all of their processes and travel with him, going to events. And I was fortunate enough to go with him to some dinners with some higher level individuals. And I could list out 100 lessons that I learned. And to be fair, a lot of them at the time went right over my head because I lacked the experience to really understand what it was he was teaching me or understand what it was that had just happened. But above all things, I learned the power of focus and attention. And I remember there was one time when, everyone's told to start a side hustle, right? And so I was working for them and I was like, all right, I'm going to launch a course online and I'm just going to bring in an extra, $3,000 to $5,000 a month for myself. Right. And that'll be great. Right. I launched this course. 2 days after I launched it, they found out about it and they said, hey, let's go have coffee. I was like, oh no, I'm getting fired. So we went and had coffee, and Alex and Layla are incredible people. And they sat me down and they just literally talked me through what it was I was looking for, and then helped me build a roadmap kind of to achieve whatever it is that I wanted. But they also narrowed my focus into that roadmap. And it was this idea that, look, you can have anything you want. You just can't have everything. And so if you split your attention, you're going to multiply the time it takes to achieve the outcome that you actually want. The best thing you can do would be to throw yourself entirely into your job. And so that night I went home, I shut everything down. I shut down the course. I shut down all the sites that I had subscriptions to. I shut it all down. I was like, all right, I'm going to listen to them. They've done something right. They know more than me. I'm going to throw everything I have into this. And so for the next couple of years, I threw everything I had into Gym Launch, and then it kind of worked my way up. I guess my final title when I was leaving was like the marketing manager, but I was fortunate enough to have a lot of exposure to all of their companies between Gym Launch, Allen, Prestige Labs, and I was able to watch them build, break, and rebuild. And it was just, it was an incredible experience. And for short note, for anyone listening, I can tell you that like Alex and Layla are exactly who they pretend to be. I was fortunate enough to be closer to them than most people, especially in that time. And I think it's rare that when you get that close to somebody that you look up to, that they stay in that light for you. I think that, when you peek behind the veil, usually it's a little disappointing, right, who these people actually are. That is not the case with them. I think I'm probably still to this day their number one fan, just because they walk the talk. And so everything that they say they do, that's exactly how they actually live. It's how they do things. And they're the nicest people. And Alex was really hard on me, but I appreciated it because he made me better. And so again, I have nothing bad to say about them. I had wonderful experience working with and for them.
I love it. So, I mean, that was really your springboard then, as far as like your education. And then once you left working with them, was it like, okay, I'm off to the races in kind of creating my own kind of digital agency? Or what was the next step after that? Or was it like, hey, I'm going to go find someone else to work for?
Yeah, there were two kind of parts to this. The first was the drive and the desire. So while working for them, Alex layered my skills. So what I came with was the ability to create content and videos. Mm-hmm. He gave me the ability to market and sell with that content. And so he taught me how to execute and stack that skill so that it would, be worth more, could do more, could reach more, could, persuade and move people. And whenever I went to the events, I would sit down and talk to all of the gym launch clients. And I probably had more conviction than anybody else in the company, because I got to sit there and listen to all these testimonials in person, but it wasn't one or two of the clients. It was every single client. They just same outcome. They were like, yeah, like I'm making 10 times more than I was. I bought my dream house. I took my family on the first vacation in years. And these are guys who before were making, I think the median income for a gym owner in the US is around, $30K. Mm-hmm. And these are guys who are now taking home $1 million or, $1 million a year in some cases. And so it was mind blowing to me. And again, it was every single person. So the conviction was there. I loved that I got to help impact these people's lives because I was able to go out and pull them into the gym launch community. And then as a result of their hard work and effort, they got the outcome. And so I kind of grew to love the marketing aspect of things. So that was the first piece. The second piece for me was the skill set. So because of all my time with Alex and Layla, I was fortunate enough for them to give me a much bigger skill set than what they were actually using me for. And so what I found at about 2.5 years in was there was a disconnect between what I was doing for them and what else I could be doing for them. And so at the time I went to them and said, hey, I think you're overpaying for what you need. I think you're underpaying for the skills that you've given me. And I said, if there's opportunities for me to grow with you guys, I'll work for you pretty much forever. I loved working for them. And we kind of sat on it for 2 weeks and just thought it over, came back and said, you know what, that disconnect might be real. And at the time, acquisition was still newly formed. It definitely wasn't what it is today. And so there was this conversation that just happened. It was like, okay, maybe now is the time. And to be honest with you, my goal was not like, I'm going to go out and I'm going to do this. Right. That came after a lot of looking inward and me kind of going, well, what do I want to do next? And they offered generously to place me with other companies at the same level. And somehow it just didn't feel right. And so we finally got to the conclusion. There's like, okay, now is the time. So I gave them 90 days. I helped train up the team that they actually needed as opposed to the team that they currently had. And then I parted on wonderful terms, and I was very blessed to part on wonderful terms. And it was around that time that I said, you know what? I want to do what I got to do for Alex and Layla at a bigger scale. I would love to do this for more companies who are actually driving change, coaching businesses that are actually delivering results, who are product obsessed. And so, I said, I think I want to go all in on this.
So how did you get your first client then?
Okay. So it was well, a lot of things kind of came out of my experience. One of those things being I got to know a lot of the gym owners and everything. Right. And so that actually plugged me into a network pretty quickly of people who were doing pretty well. And I didn't necessarily want to work with gym owners. I definitely didn't want there to be any kind of conflict of interest between Gym Launch and what I was doing. But it was one of those things where I knew them and they knew people, right? One of my first clients was actually one of their former clients. And before I kind of go too much more in depth into what I did, two big things happened while I was working for Alex, and I didn't mention these yet. And they both revolve around YouTube. So most of our experience at the time, marketing had been in B2B with a good chunk focused on B2C on when we tested several product ideas. But B2B was the primary focus. And so most of my experience was on Facebook, Instagram. We tested Snapchat. And so two things happened. One was that Alex came to me one day and said, "Hey, I want you to build me a YouTube channel." And I said, "Sounds great. I would love to build you a YouTube channel." So I built him a YouTube channel. And then it went absolutely nowhere. It didn't get any subs. Every single subscriber was like fighting tooth and nail to get, which sounds funny now because he probably gets like 5,000 to 10,000 new subs a day at the moment. But that was not the case. And so he went off and he spoke to some of the best out there, came back, handed me some notes and said, "Now go try again." I said, "Okay." So I tried again, and sure enough, it worked. It was like shocking. It was like, oh, if you just follow this formula that all the greats are using, like I can maybe have an impact. So I tried it again, and I was lucky enough to get to take his channel from, I think there was like 600 or 700 that were on his channel just as a result of some ads in the past. And I got to be with him until about 4,500, which was super exciting and cool to watch and be a part of that and kind of learn the techniques it takes to actually grow on YouTube. That was the first thing that happened. And so that kind of got me thinking, okay, YouTube is pretty powerful. The second thing that happened was he said, I want you to run ads. You run YouTube ads. And I was like, cool, I don't know how to run YouTube ads. Let's find out. So, got access to some of the top programs at the time and I gave it a go. And I failed there too. It didn't work. But I learned enough and I saw enough that I had this belief that YouTube was by far the biggest opportunity in marketing today. So I actually have a very broad knowledge base when it comes to marketing and the application of the tactics across many platforms. But I believed so heavily based on the organic and the paid that YouTube was like the key to the future. So when I left, I said, okay, how can I best serve everybody? Or how can I best serve the coaching industry today? Because that's who I wanted to work with. And so I went out, bought every single other program I could find on YouTube ads. And then I went and got one of my first clients, which was one of Gym Launch's former clients. They needed help with their YouTube ads. And so I got started with them. And then from there, it didn't work. And it's not that the ads didn't work. What actually didn't work was that my model was broken. The ads actually worked great. I learned a lot and they started working really well. I was running a performance only model because I believed so heavily that I could get these results.
Right.
And that ended up absolutely crushing me for a solid year because I kept trying to make this performance model work, but the performance model only works if they're working too. Mm-hmm. And what ended up happening was I would go out and I'd say 7 out of 10 times I was getting great results for these clients that started coming in. And then based on either, their refunds, maybe they didn't run traffic to cold before, maybe this was their first venture into cold traffic. They didn't know how to sell them or they didn't know how to retain them. And there were all these problems with the actual business and the actual acquisition system. And at the time I was like, no, this is all, I'm not going to fix your business for you. I'm just doing YouTube ads. And so, I started slowly to expand that. But then I had client after client who just, I would, build everything for them. I was doing all this work and then they didn't know how to sell. And they wouldn't get any sales. So, over time, I started to think, okay, how can I kid around? Like, there's nothing I can do on this. And I was like, I had beliefs or limiting beliefs around retainers. And today I do offer retainers. I offer performance for a select few clients based on their business model. But I was like, how do I fix this so that I can continue doing performance? Because the clients who were doing great were worth anywhere from 12 to 20K to me per month. And I was like, okay, there is something to this if I can get the business to work.
Right.
And that was it. So I went out and I found a friend of mine who I worked with at Gym Launch. He was actually the sales manager for the latter half while I was there. And we're great friends now. And I started having him come in and consult for my clients to help them get better performance from the ads and traffic that I was driving for them. And it was like overnight on the first client. Literally show up rates went from less than 15% to like 80%. The next day. And then they held there as a result of just an audit from him where he's like, hey, here's 10 things to do. Mm-hmm. And without going into too much more detail, and I'm going to bore you on this, but basically I realized that the more I could control about the acquisition process, the better results I could get, the better I could be paid. So.
And you're a firm believer in YouTube being YouTube's owned by Google, right? So the ad platform kind of the near future. So tell me a little bit why you think that is.
Yeah. So when you look at platforms like Facebook or Instagram, LinkedIn, these are all apps, right? And so you can only follow your traffic around within the app. Now there are retargeting techniques where, you can follow people who were first introduced to you on other platforms, but to truly follow someone around the internet, Google is the internet. It makes the most sense that they would, be one of the best places to market. And there's a lot of schools of thought on that, so I can expand on that more. But so first off, Google is the largest on the internet. And the second piece to it is the number of data points they have and the audience and actions that they take while on Google, right? So Google is able to actually analyze and say, okay, we have X many data points per person. And we can figure out what they are actually wanting or what the problem actually is. There was an article, what was it, at this point, 7 or 8 years ago, where a lady found out from Google that she was pregnant. And it was based off of her wasn't even her browsing history. It was like problems that she was having, things that she was searching. Google was like, hey, by the way, you're pregnant. She was like, no, I'm not. And sure enough, she was pregnant. And so that's kind of the age we live in, where we have so much information about user behavior and then where they go. And think of like Gmail. Everything you open in your mail, the way that you interact with your mail, those are all tracked. That's why it's free. It's because that data is then used to market to you and make you buy things. And when you buy things, guess what? The person who sold it to you wants to spend more money on Google because their entire platform is based on, ad spend. That's where they make their money. So we've got the size of the platform, we've got the number of data points, and we've got the fact that it is the internet. It is not an app. And when I look at product cycles, Facebook, you've already started to see a significant slowdown in the growth of Facebook, which is kind of pointing towards not the end of the product cycle, but it's pointing towards massive innovation, which is right on cue. That's where they kind of shifted to Meta and going into an entirely different realm because their product cycle was starting to slow down. The S curve was slowing down. And so between the organic and the paid, I think that there's no better platform to be on. The organic, because people are going there looking to solve their problem. They're telling you what they want to learn or what they want help with. And they're telling you in the content that they're searching, in the keywords that they're using, they're literally telling you what they want. And that is so easy. So we call that intent-based marketing versus Facebook, Instagram. That's more of interruption marketing, right? They are there for another purpose. They are there to see what's going on, to kill time, to scroll through their feed. And so on Facebook, you're fighting tooth and nail for their attention, whereas on Google, you don't have to fight nearly as hard. YouTube, you don't have to fight nearly as hard for their attention. Their attention is already there. They're already actively looking for whatever it is you are selling. All you have to do is get in front of them at the right time, the right person, at the right time with the right product, and you're going to start driving sales like crazy.
Thanks so much for listening to another episode of the Coach Catalyst podcast. If you are a coach looking to do more for your clients than just workouts, give Coach Catalyst a test drive. Try it for 14 days. Jump on call with your personal strategy coach, Ashley, and see how easy technology can be, all for free. Tell them Trevor sent you. Until next time, keep changing lives.